So thank you for joining us today. My name is Jade Ozatutu. I'm the head of RNA Leaders, and it's a pleasure to welcome you to today's RNA Leaders webinar. It's been an exciting week for the RNA field so far. I'm sure you've all been following Alnylam's recent news, and we've got a fantastic group of investors joining us today to explore the global investment outlook for RNA therapeutics. Holding this webinar ahead of our RNA Leaders USA in-person event will taking place in early September in San Diego. And this will kind of follow on that discussion where we'll look to explore the investment landscape further. And also there'll be an opportunity for emerging companies in the space to showcase their platform in a Shark Tank style forum called the Preliminary Session. I'll share more details on this later because it's an application process for that. But it's a new exciting thing that we're doing at RNA Leaders this year. And I'd like to thank our panelists joining us today, and it's great to have Ivan, Ching and Kent with us to do this discussion, and also a special thank you to Raul for moderating this session. And I'd like to hand over to Raul, who is the Venture Capitalist Associate at UCB Ventures, who have a keen interest in the RNA field. Thank you, Raul. Over to you.
Hello, thank you. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the RNA Leaders Investor Webinar. I'm Rahul Khitan, and I'll be moderating the session today. And so today, the title of the session is RNA Therapeutics Investment Global Funding Outlook for the Evolving State of RNA Medicines and Technologies. So I plan to share in this webinar how these different investment opportunities in the RNA space are evolving. So with over 500 nucleic acid companies currently at pre-series A status, over 900 RNA therapeutic programs, and the number of clinical trials being doubled over the last 5 years, the RNA industry remains ripe for investment. So I invite all my esteemed panelists to share their insights and views on these RNA therapies. To start with the ladies first rule, I'll invite all the panelists to just give a quick intro about themselves and their fund. So starting with Ching, maybe.
Thanks, Rahul. Hi, everyone. I'm really nice to be on this panel for today. Look forward to a lively discussion. So our fund is called LDV Partners. We're an early stage deep tech focused fund based in the Bay Area. And we cover North America investment. We have specific thesis, including generative AI, including biotech and the cross-disciplinaries of innovation. Our fund is named after Leonardo da Vinci, who is in honor of the cross-disciplinary innovations. That's like the culture. My personal background, trained as a physician scientist, previously researched spaces in cancer and biology. And I remember we did have this wet lab and dry lab interaction that keeps working on sequencing genomics and trying to look for new targets for drug development. Look forward to the chat today.
Thank you, Cheng. Next, Kent, maybe from Arch. Can you introduce yourself to the audience?
Kent Rogers, venture partner with Arch Venture Partners. We have a long history, about 30 years plus, with the co-founders looking at all kinds of modalities, both large and small molecule across the healthcare industry, but also including data platforms as well as other technology, and of course, exploring investments in the AI space as well. RNA is of particular interest as a growing medium for discovery. And as we continue to evolve into what actually is cell and gene therapy and what are the nuances within that, Arch remains an active investor in this space, trying to not only get ahead of what is the science that's going to be being brought to future in the coming years, but trying to stay ahead of the component that AI will have in terms of its influence on where research and development progresses.
Thank you, Kent. Then Ivan from INCEF, next maybe.
Yes, hi everyone. I'm Ivan. I'm a junior partner in the healthcare team at INCEF. INCEF is an early stage venture fund based in Amsterdam within the healthcare space, because we also have the tech arm. We invest in therapeutics, medtech, and health tech. And we don't have any particular preference for therapeutic area or modality, but there's so much exciting stuff in RNA, and we've backed a few companies in that space, namely Curalis and Cardior. And Cardior, it's a really good example because it was sold recently to Novo Nordisk. It's really encouraging example, I guess, for the whole field. Nice to be here.
Thank you, Ivan. Yeah, cardio has been a huge success story for sure. And yeah, so with that, I would say that RNA therapies represent a promising evolving frontier in medicine. And over the past few decades, researchers have made significant progress in developing RNA-based treatments for a wide range of conditions, from rare genetic disorders to cancer to viral infections. Recently, we have had some amazing momentum to the field. Like yesterday, only Alnylam Pharmaceuticals, they, a leading RNA interference therapeutics company, announced positive top-line results from its Helios phase 3 study of vutrisiran, an investigational RNA interference therapeutic in development for the treatment of ATTR amyloidosis and with cardiomyopathy. So these siRNA therapies have been showing promising results in the clinical trials. Also, last week, Roche tapped into the biotech startup Ascedian Therapeutics to discover and develop RNA exon editing medicines for neurological targets, a very chunky deal with 42 million upfront and 1.8 billion in milestone payments. So it has been a field that has seen a positive momentum recently. And with that, I think there is a lot of these myriad of different modalities within the RNA space. So I would like to know like the investor perspectives on how do they compare like these different RNA modalities, mRNA, ASO, siRNAs, aptamers. Which of these modalities do you find is currently the most exciting and why? So maybe to start with Kent, if I'll invite you to share your insights, how do these different modalities compare?
I don't know that I would say that one is more exciting than the other in many respects. I mean, the nature of our industry isn't changed with the advent of cell and gene therapy or RNA-based therapies from the perspective that modality, how we actually get drug to patient, side effects that are going to be considered in terms of how these drugs are dosed. I mean, for example, in the oligonucleotide space, these are large molecules that have got to get to targets within the body. If it's a neurological condition, then it's going to have to be an intrathecal administration. And then you're worried about the amount of product that you're putting into patient because it's got to be a larger dose in order to cross the blood-brain barrier, versus with spinal muscular atrophy, the target was right there within the spinal column. So I think there's going to be good and bad and otherwise with it, but I think the general notion of whether you're splicing, you're editing, or you're inserting, I think that's where the theoretical focus is on what's going to have the best application and the easiest application from a science perspective. We work with a lot of companies that are really in that splicing space. How do we take a single strand technology and fix a mutation? But ultimately, across all of these, if it's a disease state that is in the hundreds or thousands of patients versus tens of thousands of patients, the ultra rare diseases are harder to find the patients. And ultimately, with any business model out there, it's about the science, but it's also about what is the targeted addressable market? Do we have epidemiology that truly accurately reflects the patient population? But even if we have estimated what that population is, how are we finding those patients once these therapies actually start to realize, market approval? That still remains a challenge, I think, from a commercial perspective.
Thank you, Kent. And maybe then, Ching, what is your perspective on these pros and cons of different modalities?
Thank you, Rahul. I love this topic. Actually, just a quick review of the history of RNAs in general. We discovered mRNA like back in 1960, but the first, really blockbuster drug happened in 2020. So we all know it. It's like 80 years. And the first ASO approach like 1970-ish. And we got the first ASO like RNAi clinical trial in 2010, same as aptamers. So I agree with Kent in terms of there's no modality-wise, it's a choice, right? It's like really fit for use. There's no one modality that is significantly superior than the rest. If you look at the first aptamer approved Macugen, it worked for a while, and then but after we have better therapeutics, and of course people will go afterwards. So it's still back to the central dogma of RNA therapeutics, like 3 ways that it could be accomplished, either by binding or blocking using aptamers, like macugen. The second one, you can target and binding to native RNAs using ASOs or siRNAs. And but lastly, but not least, which is my personal favorite, is like expressing target proteins using mRNAs. And there's a lot to do about mRNAs because they're functional by themselves. And even including like ASOs, you can either decrease protein expression or increase based on how you design it. So again, back to the product, whatever modality or technology you adopt, has to start with the fundamental question: what is the product? What is the unmet medical needs? Why is this modality superior than others? Right? If we can use a small molecule that binds perfectly with no side effect, perfect is oral. It's perfect modality. But if we cannot, how do you justify the pros and cons in terms of, especially with taking into consideration of delivery of manufacturing? To one extreme, that's not relevant with RNA, but say radiopharm. Great efficiency, but you do need to manage the manufacturing and supply chain very well before you can make it really commercial and widely available to patients. So I think, I would say no preference. They can all be promising. Maybe we have an aptamer drug like in a couple of years. I don't know, but we'd love to see what kind of disease that they treat.
Yes, brilliant. And I believe there would be a lot of entrepreneurs and R&D professionals who are working in these therapies in the audience. And so maybe from like the audience perspective, what should be like the go, no-go decision of particular modalities? If an early stage biotech is developing a therapy, what should be their thinking process like? What should be their approach to be in terms of selecting? Like you mentioned, like you should have the end goal in the mind, in the application in mind. So as an early stage entrepreneur, how would you approach that problem?
I can address to that without saying too much about the company's name, but we do have a portfolio that are working in mRNA space. The reason why is because the mechanism of the disease. Like, are you gonna edit the genome, the DNAs? Are you gonna edit the RNAs? So different approaches lay all the options on the table, right? And the third option, you just do protein replacement by mRNAs, which can be more effective, more practical, and safe. Safety is on top of every answer. I mean, like every consideration. People are shying away from editing DNAs, and I've seen more companies working on RNA and editing and sensors because it's just safe, might be transient, effect doesn't change the genome, just safe to start with. But if you can replace the proteins as needed and one shot that lasts for 3 months or 6 months, that's sort of a great approach. Instead of like doing gene editing and delivering to replace the sick genes. So I think it starts from the mechanism of the biology of the disease per se. What is the cost? Is it because of the genetic mutation, dysfunctional protein? What is the cost?
Okay, thank you, Cheng. Yeah, interesting. And so maybe then, Ivan, what is your perspective on this like landscape of different RNA therapies that one can develop?
I love them all. I mean, all types of modalities. But for me, it's just very important that a particular tool is solving a particular problem, right? And we see that both mature platforms, but also emerging platforms, they also often suffer from the same drawbacks, such as delivery and things like that. So I just want to make sure that there is a relevant unmet need, that this tool is capable of theoretically solving it, and we have the right translational path to show it, right? But of course, I mean, there's certain technologies that are now sufficiently de-risked, right? So you look at ASOs, you splice switching, siRNA. So we know a lot about them. So we also know where the potential liabilities lie. We know how to avoid them. So I think that's, of course, an advantaged position. If you unlock the delivery part somehow, then I mean it's a safe option to go with one of these modalities. Of course, if they're right, fit for purpose for a particular healthcare problem.
Okay, thank you, Ivan. And then maybe I think another aspect of this is building on like these delivery and RNA design challenges. So what do you think is like the key delivery and RNA design challenges that need to be addressed by these RNA therapies? Like as an investor, when you like see the deal flow, what are the kind of the key questions that you dive on these RNA design and delivery aspects before making an investment decision? So maybe to start with Ching, maybe if you can provide what's your perspective at LDV Partners.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I saw a question here from the audience. I think that's a brilliant question that we challenge ourselves, and we actually ask entrepreneurs. It's a discussion. Like, what do you think? Right? Do you want to design a platform versus like an asset? But I think so. Again, back to the fundamentals, starting from unmet medical needs and the why are you doing this, right? And what are the specific challenges that you say? For example, if you want to design like endogenous RNA, not from external sources, what is your manufacturing? How do you make it? So I think start from what you want to build, and then coming backwards, like saying, what are the challenges? Has it been done before? Is there good CMC? I mean, how do you know that it works? So do you want to build GMP yourself? Do you want to outsource it? If so, who are your vendors? So when you do the budgeting, like say how much money you need to reach what milestone, I would love to see as more details as possible. I really like pull from vendors, like this is real. So the financial model, I'm a big fan of building that model, not because it's just show the DCF or show what you need, but it's really like walking you through what is the cost that is needed. And most of the time you will underestimate the cost by, I mean, to be very conservative, double it, double or triple it sometimes, because it's always late. It's always delayed, and it's very practical. Like whoever can execute fast, from the moment you outsource to CROs, outsource to CDMOs, outsource to clinical trials, and pick your first in human. I mean, where do you do it? Yeah, I mean, happy to provide our learnings along the way, like which process might most likely be significantly delayed and very costly. So I think a lot of lessons learned from that perspective. But people who have done enough market research will know what is the best practice here.
Brilliant. So I think, yeah, the message for the entrepreneurs is to like do a proper market research and come with a detailed costing plan on these technologies. And maybe to build on that, so from like the first audience question from Mohammed, he's asking about how these technology platform compare in emerging markets like Japan, APAC, and Australia compared to US and Europe. So what do you think is like the level of maturity in these different geographical regions? So Ching, yeah,
Happy to share my 2 cents, Mohammed. Thanks for the question. So I think different countries or regions have their own forte. Like say, for example, I think manufacturing is very strong in Japan, Korea, Taiwan. It's not, oh no, it's actually very similar to other industries too. And so if you're looking for, manufacturing capacity, they might be a very good potential partner to work with. In terms of the biology side, honestly, I think US is, there's so many brilliant, wonderful scientists here, but you can also find, brilliant scientists in biohub clusters. I believe Ivan has more comments on Amsterdam and Netherlands. I've heard great hubs and just the density of talents there as well. And UK, there's a hub. So I think from a science-wise, it can be, I don't use the word up to opportunistic, but there are talents everywhere. And you might want to know like which lab is working on what and for how long. But in terms of the industrial downstream, like purification, how do you make that? I mean, there might be very specific regions and partners you want to work with.
Okay, brilliant. So maybe Ivan, like if you can share like your insights on this as well.
Well, I think drug development business is truly global. So if you have a really good technology, right, with promise, you will find a way to produce or I don't know stuff or to do hire the right talent. Ultimately, you will, if you have to relocate for the purpose of being able to hire the right people, that's what you would do. So that's why I don't view the market in terms of subsegmented geographies, unless for the case when there's really good reason for that. Let's say, I don't know, there's a specific disease that is really just really prevalent in this geography and maybe nowhere else, right? Or very significantly more prevalent, or where regulations, for some reason, they allow to do things that are maybe not necessarily as easy to do in other markets, right? But these are more, I would say, rare cases. So yeah.
Brilliant. Okay, and then I think building on that, then Kent, I'd like to ask to you, because of you have that payer and regulatory perspective from your profile. So how do you think is like this regulator and FDA guidance regarding like these RNA therapies and delivery technologies?
Well, I think in general, what we're finding is that Europe is actually, I don't know if I'd say ahead of the US, but I would certainly say they're probably much more of a glide path to approval ex-US than in US. FDA just recently sent out guidance on a 506K pathway that is really more platform-based. And the intention there was to try to signal to industry that as so-called cell and gene therapy and RNA-based therapies come to market, they're going to have different modalities and different requirements. And the efficiency of being able to discover these medications may not have to go through the traditional toxicology studies, which is 60-70% of the cost and the time and the delay that most products have in getting to market. Some of these drugs are going to get to market in phase 2 versus phase 3. The patient populations are so much smaller. You're having to design and implement clinical trials differently. In some of these cases, it might be in vitro that they actually get approval from. I think you're looking at experimental gene sequencing efforts in the UK, as well as other countries that are basically ahead of where we are today. I think there's states that are starting to try to pass this, but certainly not at a federal level. And the bar to pass that, I think, in some of these countries is such that, look, the costs associated with some of these rare diseases is so high that we're willing to actually put ourselves out there from an advanced approval perspective, whereas FDA in the US is trying to create a structured approach to this. That may take a few more years, but the general sense is Peter Marks and other folks in both CDER and CBER have been vocal about the fact that they want a glide path to the approval of these products that's not as long and laborious as we've seen in traditional drug design, which is a good thing from an investment perspective. I think we might have lost Raul, our moderator.
Sorry, I'm back. I think I just got a weird internet connection. Sorry for that. So yeah, so I think on that, so we also have like a question from audience on the regulatory side. So we have one question regarding how are the investors kind of implementing these regulatory strategies right very much in the investment process. So Kent, if you can share those insights as well.
Yeah, that's a good question, because I think that's the balance that a lot of investors have got to take in place. And what, if you think about it from historical perspective, prior to the launch of RNA therapies and more in cell and gene-based therapies, the timeline could be 5 to 10 years from drug discovery through phase 1, 2, 3 to approval. And so you're truly trying to get through stage gates to show if the theory of our protein target will play out. In this, you're condensing that time frame theoretically down to a very short period. It could be a couple of years, 3 years, 4 years, or even less. So the R&D and the commercialization, meaning regulatory approval, is now condensed to a point where you need to be thinking about that from the outset. But that's a work in motion. So I think that's where, as I'd mentioned, the 506K that FDA came out with is an attempt to trying to provide guidance to industry, which is also guidance to any investment community out there, but it's playing out in real time. I think ex-US markets, like I mentioned, in Europe, are more open to the approval process not being as traditional as the past, or even applying traditional approval pathways to these kinds of therapies. But there's risks associated with this. You have to balance what's the disease state, what's the impending risk-benefit equation that you have in these disease states versus a more traditional approval approach.
Okay, thanks, Kent. And then maybe I'll ask a question to Cheng here. We have a question from audience on RNA manufacturing and delivery that is becoming increasingly challenging from an IP perspective. So what are your thoughts to the extent like the company need to in-license to make a functional product? So it's about that IP perspective, how much novelty is required in those areas. So Cheng, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, again, thank you for the question. I think this is definitely very important. If you talk about the drug product, what are your drug substance? Theoretically, I mean, from a high level, I would say don't have too many variables at the same time. It would just be super challenging to balancing every single component. So if you have, say, a good, mature, validated delivery vehicle, I mean, AAV is still super hot, right? And you just want to validate what is your MOA, what is the new novel biology here. But of course, there are cases like your TPP needs to require repeated dosing. You just cannot use whatever is available. Then, unfortunately, you do have to go back and start working on the fundamentals yourself. But I think what is promising is the vibrant ecosystem that we're in, like many people working on VLPs, novel LNPs, new AV stuff, like EVs as delivery vehicles. Just keep your options open. And I will say if you can license one, just license. Instead of like spending, you don't know how many years to work on the fundamental yourself, it might not necessarily be better. And not to say the potential IP, just give you extra unnecessary trouble down the road. I think the milestone, the goal is to get data readout, clinical POC as fast as possible. So timing is key. And how do you do that? Just leveraging all the tools you can from the toolboxes. Of course, very careful about, how do you structure the term sheet? How do you do the licensing? How do you navigate the IP landscape? But I believe if you work with somebody, with experience, that should be manageable.
So okay, I would just add, if I'm reading the question right, it's the extent to which the companies need to in-license technologies to make a functional product. And that ultimately kind of gets at sort of the challenges here. So IP is an interesting question from the perspective that oftentimes we've got use patents and a whole host of dozens of patents for a product that may be large or small molecule. In this particular situation, there are companies like Orbital Therapeutics, that's an Arch investment that's out there that is trying to get at the idea of, well, what protein or proteins need to be expressed? How do we translate protein expression that it will impact a disease process? What's the duration of that protein expression so that we can actually produce, an RNA medicine that optimizes the half-life, and then the location, which cells or tissue is where the protein is required. So engineering a delivery approach to reach those specific cells oftentimes isn't within the purview of a company that's doing R&D within a given space. So I think partnership in these areas is going to be pretty vital. There's a lot of companies out there that are trying to take that expression, duration, location, like Orbital Therapeutics is. And I think that kind of turns the IP a little bit on its head. Are you sharing IP? Do I have part of it and you have another? Am I able to create an arrangement where I use your IP to make a functional product, but I retain full sales on that product once it comes to market? I mean, this is going to be a bit of an exercise for the IP folks out there that have not had to apply layers of IP and technology onto a product versus just molecular structure and use.
Interesting. So yeah, I think it's about like having those negotiation skills and like managing those license agreements effectively for these IP deals. And maybe the next question I'll come to Ivan. So I think these RNA therapies have several technical challenges that limit the pace of achievements, primarily the tissue-specific nucleic acid delivery, stability, and durability of protein expression. So as an investor, how do you see like these technical challenges? And is it a key go, no-go decision in your investment process if a certain startup or a company has not addressed these challenges? And how do you see these playing in the funding aspect of RNA therapies?
No, well, for us, that's quite crucial. So we need to make sure that not only you have the right tool to address a certain target, but we need to make sure that indeed it goes where it needs to go in certain quantities, that it decreases or whatever does with the target something at the levels that are required to do that. So you need to build translational data to support that. No, sometimes you start with investment at the pre-seed level or company creation where the data is not there, but this is when we are trying to think of that path. And what we found out that some maybe model organisms that are, let's say, normally used in other areas of drug development, like for small molecules, not necessarily they're applicable to to RNA world. And for example, for things like microRNAs, there are a lot of species specific differences. Like, for example, that company that I mentioned, Cardior, they had to run what they call the biggest big trial in history. So this was, I think, a trial with 150 mini pigs or something. But the thing is that in mini pigs, the repertoire of kind of microRNA interactome is pretty close to that of the humans. So the data that they generated there, it was pretty translational. So that was the reason why we invested, because otherwise, if you look at the company, it's quite risky. I mean, it's cardiovascular field. It is a novel type of target in a way. You downregulate the microRNA, so you go in the cardiovascular space with an ASO, so it's supposed to go to the heart in the right point. So like stacking multiple risks, but it was exactly the preclinical data that got us convinced, and that I think what was also recognized by Novo, also the fact that it did translate into early human trial results. So that is a critical component for us.
Okay, thanks for sharing like that Cardior insight. And maybe there was like one more audience question regarding how does like a platform play compared to like a company with a lead asset in terms of funding? So how do you compare, like from your INCEF perspective, like what do you prefer, like a platform play, or do you prefer companies that have been investing in their lead asset all the way through?
For us, it's not really a binary situation. It's a sort of a spectrum. So I for many products, I can think how you can expand this into a platform. But that also, it's a good question. What comprises a true platform? Because often you see that people are trying to just label things, to make it look like a platform when it's really not. But the most important thing for me is that you choose for your technology the use case that really exemplifies the value of this technology, and ideally something that nobody else can do, or where you're the best positioned, and then you think through the right business model to support this business. Because well, at least I think if our goal is to create ideally independent companies that do not have to rely on an M&A, but that can really become the next Vertex, Galapagos, Argenx, and so on. And just like Ascidian has got this collaboration with Roche going on, like it's a business model to sustain your business, to get non-dilutive capital, to further build your pipeline, to maybe acquire certain skills that you don't necessarily have on your team, because I know that their lead program is targeting a rare eye or ophthalmological indication, but it looks like with Roche it's more neuro focused, right? So definitely they're going to learn a lot from there. So thinking smart with how you can sustain and develop your company in the long term, that's what's important. And of course, building on really differentiated applications, use cases to really understand where your technology platform stands out. That's how we usually think about that.
Brilliant. And then maybe another question that the audience has is about how does the data and IP, and how does the outside of the data and IP, how does the composition of the team, the experience, the visibility, and the seniority play a role in the decision to invest? So maybe I'll ask first you, Ivan, and then maybe then Ching, you as well. Maybe if you can share your perspective. So Ivan, if you have anything to say on that.
Yeah, the earlier the stage the company is at, the less important it is for us to have the team. But I think all the other investors will tell you the same, because we can help the company to build the management team. But it's really important that there's always someone who is willing to drive the story. So I know that there are some VCs that, let's say, prefer just to go in and license IP, do the whole thing themselves, like completely incubate, build companies. And for us, it's important that there is at least, scientific father or someone who is willing to step up and, be the active protagonist in that story, to help us doing that. That's our approach. But I know that, other funds might have different perspectives.
Yeah. So Ching, what is your perspective? How important is the team and the seniority and like the scientific backing and the academic collaboration that the company has? How important is that for RNA therapies?
Yeah, I think I agree with Ivan's on a high level. I think a different stage of a company, different team, but there are I mean, everyone needs to be aligned on who is doing what, and of course there has to be commitment to there's need to be a deep of faith that this will work. And somebody who writes it from day one, that will be super helpful. There has to be a debate around, especially for CGT or advanced therapy space, about founder-led versus not founder-led. So basically, it's like you build it to the day that you need the experienced CEO to take over the company versus a founder-led that from day one is building.
Yeah,
it's still a debate. I don't know which model is better. There are pros and cons in each, but given the macro, financing environment, that has become more obvious that experienced team, you might save more time and cost, and you are more sure of your milestones and how much budget you need to secure to deliver the milestone. That is very important. I saw a question earlier as well about what is the reason that most often, like there's concerns. I would say a clear plan to achieve the next milestone and define the next milestone is important in this scenario.
Brilliant. And then Ching, also a related question from the audience is on what is the main reason or most occurring reason during a due diligence for a VC to not fund the launch? So at the launch, like there's not much data package to kind of have a proper validation. So what is like the reason of decline for the VCs when they don't fund like a launch stage company?
Yeah, again, it depends on what's the definition of launch stage. Sometimes technology can be pretty far ahead and ready to build into MVP. We call it we call it like a PCC stage, right? So if you have like a target, but again, it depends. Like say you find a new target in Alzheimer's, say for example, that might be super important. But if say there's some new potential mechanism to treat, like non-small cell lung cancer, you have to beat PD-1, and that will be considered more risky because the performance of current options is pretty good. So I think it depends on what is the problem you're solving and how urgent is the unmet medical needs here. I think starting from, and then coming back to whether it is research stage, you should probably stay at the lab for a little bit longer and use grant money to push more data, or is it readily fundable as a company? Because every dollar should be invested into generating data to do POC. That's my 2 cents. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then maybe now I'll move to Kent to answer about how are investors working with RNA companies to back the industry and evaluate the new data. So how does that interplay work, suppose at like your firm?
Well, I think that's what the interesting part of your question before is that we go back to some of the fundamentals of where we invest and why we invest or why we continue to invest. Science is evolving so quickly in this space that you'll find some more established ideas such as ASOs. These are kind of being considered de-risked. I saw one of the questions in here that this is considered a de-risked modality.
Yeah.
I think in the context of what you would consider a de-risk modality doesn't remove the risk of, is it being managed well? Do they have the right individuals within the company to actually coordinate with the right partners, as well as spec manufacturing, delivery within the system? This is not a traditional approach. And in many respects, this is tailored medication. And so unless you're dealing with disease states that are larger in focus, maybe 5,000, 10,000, 15,000 patient populations, then you're talking about a bit of a dubious process here where you've got maybe 5, 10, 100 patients, how are you going to find them? How long is it going to take? So the science is always important, but the commercialization part of this technology today has not been answered well. And I think we're seeing struggles from Bluebird Bio and some of the companies out there that have consistently said it's about finding patient one, getting patient on drug. Okay, so we've got this wonderful science. We've been able to get these studies through approval process, but then we don't know where the patients are. I think that's actually where we're really either kind of falling or failing from the perspective that, are we integrating with payer databases that have medical and pharmacy encounter? Are we looking at them as partners to be able to say, where are these patients? Because they are using the medical system, they're using the healthcare system today. Unfortunately, if they're using it to a large extent, they may be symptomatic and beyond treatment, but it's a start. Until we get to a place where we've got gene sequencing happening at birth across the board, these aren't the kinds of diseases that we're going to be identifying until they're largely symptomatic or somebody's actually gone and gotten a test randomly for it. So those are hangovers for any investment thesis. But that being said, it's got to still have at least an investment thesis that has a good targeted addressable market.
Okay. And then also, Kent, like one of the audience question is, what is the role of the CROs in evaluating like these companies and in context of also de-risking? So how does like the CROs play a role in this in your investment due diligence as well?
Yeah, this will be a bit of a current controversial topic, but I don't know that the CROs are without complaint, even the really good ones that are out there. I think there's still a line that you have to get behind from other companies competing with CROs' attention from the perspective that, are you getting the top individuals? Are you teaching them and they're learning on your dime? But this is a coordinated effort, and this therapeutic category RNA, regardless of the section within RNA research that you're at, it really requires much more a collaborative approach to try to find those academic and research centers that may not be adept at doing the studies that you see in other centers, but I need to go there because that's where patients are, and I can't have them stand in a line at another research and development facility because they don't have that time. So do we need to have more of a decentralized approach that's giving aid to some of these centers that don't have the ability to get pristine clinical trial data sets that can be provided for an FDA approval, as an example? I don't know that there's CROs out there that are either competing in that space or maybe adapting to assist in that space, but I see a decentralized clinical trial approach as probably being more necessary in this area.
Okay, very interesting. So I think the decentralized clinical trial is the way to go forward. And also, I think we have a question from audience on how do scientists with innovative technologies find and identify the right VC. So I think I'll ask all the panelists one by one, what is their thought? How should a academic founder with a very innovative idea approach the right VC? So maybe to start with Ching, what is your perspective? If you're an academic founder with an innovative idea, which VC do you reach out to? Like, is it through like the local ecosystem starting first, or do you find some investors who have invested in companies similar to yours before, or things like that? What is your take on that?
I'm definitely biased. I'll give you partners, I would say. Well, of course, I mean, go to your friendly VCs that who trust you, who know what you're working on, and who has the necessary resource and experience to help you take it off.
Okay, so it's like through the networking and building your own connections, getting that early, like friendly feedback, and then going out for the wider outreach. Yes, interesting insight. Ivan, what's your perspective? How should like a academic founder or like a person with an idea approach the right VC?
I always promote that idea that especially with early stage projects, the stage of the ideas, you have to try to do as much as you can not on a shoestring, but let's say without yet tapping into VC money, because it's not just VCs that are out there that that this could be the source of the capital. So some countries have really rich non-dilutive public grants options, and there are incubators, other sources of capitals, like even angel investors, but you have to be of course careful with going for the right angels. But I think what's really important is to get the relationship going with the right skilled VCs from the very early on, because then if they like your technology, if they, think, they could potentially collaborate with you in the future, they can help you to shape the story in the right way so that you build everything in an appropriate way to then actually maximize your chance of getting VC funding later on, but, not giving up so much of your company, because it's just like super early, and then, they come in and build everything from scratch, but you already come with some validation. So that's what I would encourage people to do.
Okay, brilliant. Kent, what is your perspective on that? So if a company has like this pre-seed funding and this grant funding and this initial validation, how important is that for Arch to invest?
Yeah, I mean, I would say that our investment thesis is actually anywhere from pre-seed all the way through about Series B. I mean, I dropped 50,000 into companies and then all the way up to, several hundred million. I think our largest investment to date is Xera, which is an AI-based platform. So I think mostly to me, the VC firms, and I'll be a little biased in the Arch space, is that if they're looking for moonshots and they're willing to take a risk on moonshots, and this area is arguably, a moonshot space, then it really comes down to, well, who are the other backers? What kind of leadership do you have in place? And oftentimes where you might get really good scientists that are in place, you're going to need, someone that has a business acumen that's going to be able to tell the story and be able to get a drug to market. That's a tough balance in any part of our industry, in particular this area, because we're learning it as we go. And so finding an expert in the scientific space that actually can articulate it, it ends up becoming almost a debate instead of a clear and defined medical argument.
Yeah, so that balance is very crucial indeed. And also, like, since you invest in like the pre-seed all the way up to late stage, a question would be like, what makes you like decide on the stage of a company? Suppose if there's like a seed stage company, what makes you like wait for a later round, or makes your decision that like, let's invest in this round?
It's going to be dependent on each of the VCs. And I think to the question earlier about, which VC do you go with and who's actually going to be supportive, the makeup and the investment theses vary across the board. Arch specifically is more pre-seed to Series A and B. I think that's the first question you ask when you're going for investment, is who's going to help me early on. In some respects, VC firms may not really be concerned if a drug actually gets to market, because they're looking for IPO, or they're looking for the product or the company to be sold at some point, and that's the return they get on their investment. So that early stage return is not a later stage asset. Now, there are specific VCs that focus on later stage, and their emphasis is much more on how do I actually maximize the number of indications for the product as well as the market uptake, much more of a commercial mindset. And so they're more focused on leadership. Who do you actually have in place? And they're going to be much more focused on how your commercialization, pricing, distribution strategy is being executed. Whereas in earlier stage VC, it's arguably focused on the science. How good is the science? How relevant is the science for a return?
Brilliant. And then also, like, for RNA therapies, I think on the commercial side, there's been like the thing that we have not seen any blockbusters yet. Like, since in the biologics, we have these blockbusters, for only a handful of products in RNA have achieved commercial success with more than 1 billion in sales. So maybe I'll ask the question to Cheng, that what do you think is the current RNA pipeline products and what makes them achieve commercial success? And what do you think would be the key factors in upcoming future that would make RNA therapies as attractive commercially like biologics?
That is a big topic, Rahul. I think, so let me just repeat what I heard and make sure that, so what is the pipeline now that will potentially lead to blockbuster therapeutics?
Yes.
You're talking about? Yeah. I honestly feel we're just at the beginning yet. So with a lot of like, we have more therapeutics being approved, and we'll see what is long-term efficacy and how they perform in the real world. But with the fast advancing technologies to assist in every single challenge along the way of developing a drug, I think this is very promising. Like small molecules, mature modalities, see how we don't need something fancy overnight, but honestly, I think small molecules and mature modalities still, I mean, they still work very well. So I don't think in the future they will be gone. But of course, for certain diseases, there's so many things that we don't have a treatment because we have like 1% of proteins that is expressed, and like 10% of those expressed are targetable. So there's so many undruggable targets that still needs a novel solution. And if RNA can solve the problem, brilliant. If it cannot, maybe we need cell therapy. So I think this is an evolving conversation, but I'm very promising. I mean, I love to see more advancement like to solve the problems that previously undruggable.
Okay, maybe a quick question to Evan as well on that. So for you, how important is like the commercial potential of the companies that you're evaluating? Suppose like RNA therapies, would you like, will you be willing to sacrifice a bit of commercial potential compared to like the conventional modalities of small molecules and biologics? So what is your perspective on this lower commercial therapies?
It's quite important. The first maybe product to make it to the market doesn't have to be a blockbuster, but then you have to make sure that the whole platform can generate those. And the question you asked about, big blockbuster potential products. So you look at the pipeline, there's a lot of stuff now for mass indications, I would say. Let's say a lot of stuff in metabolism, right? You have, I don't know, Silence and Arrowhead targeting LP(a). I think Pfizer has the program, right? So this kind of programs, they can really be, used just like inclisiran, right? Although its commercial success still has to happen, right, in the broader population, and that's quite interesting to see how that will evolve. And you see that the whole field initially started with more rare diseases, right? But yeah, we're gonna get there to the big products. And just last notion, we had a previous edition of RNA Leaders Conference, John Androsevich from Pfizer, and he made one interesting quote. He said Pfizer wouldn't even look at partnering, an RNA program if the potential peak sales is less than 1 billion. So they just, that doesn't make sense for them to bother, given the size of the organization versus the effort they have to put into that. So something to bear in mind.
Thank you, Evan. And maybe like I'll take a quick final audience question since we are nearing the time. So I'll ask there's a question on, are the investment opportunities being evaluated case by case basis, or is it like they take it together and then they are scored and ranked? So Kent, maybe if you can tell about how does this system work for you? It's a case by case, or do you go and landscape things and then rank the companies?
It's a little bit of both. I mean, I'd say that there is a bit of an art versus a science to this. Case by case basis can happen because there's either cold call and or people that have a wonderful network, reach out. There tends to be a very small community here, though, whether it's scientists or leadership within these companies as well as investors. It's a very small water cooler. So you tend to kind of work with other VC firms, other investors that you're comfortable with. They've got a good track record. The pitch is probably a little bit easier because you're of the same mindset in terms of what you're looking for and return on an investment, as well as what you're putting your money into. But you got to remember the batting average for success here in this space is pretty low. I mean, you get a 300 batting average in baseball and you're in the Hall of Fame. So in the VC world, it's a little bit of the same. And in that respect, that the general aspect of this is that there's going to be a lot of investments that may never see the light of day for many reasons. So you do have to take a bit of a holistic approach, but it doesn't negate the idea that someone comes up with a wonderful mousetrap that needs attention and needs curation. And you can be outside that formal construct and investing there just because it's a great idea and you feel like you need to get on it as quick as possible.
Thank you. Yeah, we all need just like a one home run to achieve that. So also I'll just quickly get to Cheng for one more question. So with this new Alnylam results and this momentum that the field is getting, would this change anything in the VC mentality towards these modalities? How is VC seeing this RNA therapies to succeed in future, and would they supersede these conventional modalities and other approaches?
I think undoubtedly it will keep boosting the confidence in the space, and I think it gives people just more evidence, see how well it can perform. And in general, I think it doesn't change. It didn't change anything. I recall that JP Morgan, the sentiment from JP Morgan this year is also about there's still a lot of hopes and promises in the CGT space, and it will keep growing for sure. So I think this just keeps adding on to boost the confidence from everyone that is involved in this industry.
Okay, and I'll maybe quickly have insights from Ivan as well on this. So how important is like this RNA therapies field, and what do you see like in future? How would this evolve?
No, people definitely are excited about RNA field, and it's so diverse, it's so broad. I only have one question. So you can have this big pharmas, right? But also you have these fairly mature companies in this space, like Alnylam, like Ionis, and you don't see them being super acquisitive, right? And more, maybe they add a little bit of enabling technologies, but I would like to better understand, so what can maybe create the next wave of innovation that is going to be demanded by players like them, because they will start having capital, right, with these big launches and so on. So just this is something I'm thinking about, how what kind of, it's like the same question, when Moderna or BioNTech started having a lot of money, people started asking, okay, what are they going to do with this money? How are they going to grow the business organically, what they're going to acquire? So that's the same kind of question I have. So still thinking about it. Don't have an answer yet.
Yeah, so I think it's important to monitor like the exit potential of these therapies. So as you mentioned, if these players start kind of acquiring like those technologies beyond just enabling technologies, that can create like that exit potential, and that can definitely boost the investor interest. So with that, it was a wonderful discussion. I'll thank all the panelists here, and I'll hand over to Jade because she has some interesting insights on a polymerase pitching opportunity coming up in September. Jade, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you all, and thank you to Kent, Ivan and Kim for that great discussion, and thank you all for joining. Great to see all the questions come in. Unfortunately, we weren't able to answer them all, but we answered quite a bit, which I think is great that it was a nice and interactive discussion. So yeah, like I mentioned at the beginning, the next kind of point where we'll be looking a little bit more into like the investor landscape will be in person at RNA Leaders USA in San Diego, which is the 4th and 5th of September. Part of that, there is a polymerase forum, which I have mentioned at the beginning, which is making its debut. It's a forum that's designed to give early stage innovators a unique platform to showcase their latest scientific advancements to industry experts, potential partners in a dynamic Shark Tank style. So what that means is you can apply for one of those sessions. You'll have a 10-minute pitch with a review panel. Kent will be on one of those panels. And it's a mixture of investors and pharma partners as well. So we've got some leaders from J&J and Novo Nordisk on that session as well, some as well West Coast investors as well. So these are all people that obviously focus on the RNA field. If you have joined this webinar, there's also a discount if you do apply for one of those sessions. We'll send you email you the details alongside that, or you can reach out to me directly if you want more information on that, and that will be around, I think, until the 12th of July, so please look out for that email. And yeah, also just would be great to see you guys in September to kind of continue this conversation, what we're doing to kind of accelerate the commercialization and innovation of RNA therapeutics. So thank you all for joining, and I'll leave it there because we're completely just on time and I want to finish on time. But yeah, thank you all for joining us today. Thank you again to all the panelists and Rahul for moderating. It was great to have you with us, and we'll hope to see you again in person in September.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day ahead. Goodbye.
All right,
Thank
bye.
you. Goodbye.